Hi, everyone. My name is Sophie Scott, and I'm a board member of I Have the Right To. To mark this year's Sexual Assault Awareness Month, we are releasing the second season of our series of interviews with survivors of sexual assault. The idea for these interviews came from a conversation that I had had with Chessie a number of years ago, where she mentioned that she wished there had been a resource for survivors like herself to hear from other survivors about their path of navigating survivorship. And I said, well, wait a minute, why don't we create that ourselves? And so that's what this is. And we're really excited for you to hear from, to learn from all of the incredible survivors that we have spoken to for this second season. Steve, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. You've been such a great friend and mentor to me and to the whole I Have the Right To community. So this is a really exciting conversation to get to have.
Great. Thank you, Sophie, for taking the time to do this and continue to promote healthy relationships and create awareness for survivors on how they can find a good path to healing.
Absolutely. So you are a male survivor of sexual assault. What do you wish that more people knew about male survivors of sexual assault? I think so often people associate being a survivor with sexual assault with women or with girls. But you and I both know that that is very much not always the case.
Yeah, I think, first of all, that's a great place to start in terms of the prevalence of all sorts of sexual violence. As you indicated, most people are probably aware that 1 in 4 women do experience sexual assault and sexual violence, in many cases before they're able to vote. And the numbers aren't much better when it comes to men. So whether it's the CDC numbers of 1 in 6 or other surveys that I've seen at 1 to 10, 1 to 13, the reality is that all of those numbers are unacceptable. And probably the unique or the more male-related piece is trying to get good numbers. There's a lot of stigma that's experienced by any survivor of sexual assault. But with men, particularly in our country, there are the masculine images and masculine masks that I think do prevent a lot of boys and men from coming forward. A lot of parents and institutional environments that aren't aware of it, so aren't as supportive for males to come forward. So I think first and foremost, as a starting point, that's a great kicking off point for the discussion, which is it is extremely prevalent, and it is in all cases very difficult for victims and survivors of sexual assault to come forward.
What was your experience like coming forward as a male?
It was mixed. It was mixed. So I was sexually abused by a much older adult, teenage adult neighbor, 17, 18 years of age, while I was between 10 and 12, obviously. As with a lot of survivors, the details are, many have escaped me, probably thankfully. But I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell anyone when it was happening. I didn't tell anyone after it had concluded, just before I was going to high school. And I didn't tell anyone for about a decade. And then it's very common with victims and survivors of sexual assault. The only thing that prompted me to disclose in my mid-20s was that someone had disclosed to me. And there is that moment of solidarity where you see each other.
Yeah.
And that connection allowed me for the first time to say the words out loud that I was sexually assaulted. I then selectively told my then girlfriend, now wife, as well as a couple of family members. I'm from a family of seven, six boys and one sister. And I told my parents as well. And they did not have the language, the vocabulary, the experience really to know what to do. And the way that it came off to me at the time was that they didn't care. It's not that no one didn't believe me, but it's just that they didn't care and I wasn't going to get the support I need. And we can talk later on where I realized that that was my own experience of it and that they really didn't feel that way. But it really left me feeling alone in my own trauma and with very little support to deal with it.
Before you did disclose for those 10 years, what was that experience like where you were just living with that information and, that experience that had happened to you, that trauma, and were navigating it all yourself?
Yeah, I think about that a lot in terms of my development. So since puberty, my sexual development had been really significantly altered and in some ways destroyed. So although I never really lost the memories of it happening, certainly individual instances, yes, it was always omnipresent in my experience. And I really learned how to compartmentalize and being a victim, and I'll go back and forth between victim and survivor, which we can talk about later as well. But as a victim, I knew that it had happened. I didn't know that it was assault. I don't even know if I knew that it was abuse. But it really manifested in hypersexualization, which is, as I look back, very hard to parse from being a teenager growing up in 1980 in America with a lot of misogyny and poor information about sex and human sexuality and relationships. So I think that for me, it became the abuse in its own place, and then I obsessed on sexuality, pornography, and all sorts of destructive thoughts and behaviors that really didn't set me up for success. And at the same time, kind of dove into the misogyny pool. So I went to an all-boys high school, so there was a lot of locker room talk, and in that context, the locker room is pretty much the entire environment. So from that point forward, I would say that a lot of the experience I had was similar to my brothers and my classmates, but clearly heavily influenced by me feeling different and alone and damaged.
When you then did disclose and your family kind of met your bravery of talking about what had happened to you, maybe not in the way that would have been best to support you, was there ever a moment when then you wish that you hadn't told anyone at all? How did you navigate that?
Yeah, I never really thought about it that way as a regret. I think there was a certain amount of weight that was lifted by disclosing, particularly in that environment. My fiance, Kim, she's not my wife, was more tuned into therapy as a way to help deal with not just trauma but life. So we did, or with Kim's urging, I did pursue therapy. And what's interesting, I had a similar experience with my first therapist up here in Boston, where on my first session, it was a male therapist. I kind of knew why I was there, which was to try to work through some of these feelings, but also to really understand feelings because it wasn't a big part of my experience that had been explored. And I don't know what he said, but what I took away from it was, why don't you come back when you're ready to talk? So for me, it was a series of kind of like little doors opening, then shutting, opening, then shutting. Fortunately, I stuck with it and found a therapist out in Brookline, a little bit outside of Boston. And I'd go to my entry level job, 9 to 5, 9 to 6, get on the Green Line, take a 50-minute trolley ride out to Brookline, and really had a good experience with a wonderful therapist.
Yeah, sometimes that can be sort of a a journey to navigate of finding the best fit for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I've come to find that since then, where I've had other therapies and other therapists, and I've talked to a lot of people where it can be a struggle, not particularly nowadays post COVID, to find a therapist, but then to find the right therapist, it does take some time, and that's not just the physical location; it's also the chemistry and the level of connection, and unfortunately the finances.
Would you be able to tell me a little bit about what it was like having, a trusted family friend break that trust and harm you? Was it hard for you to then feel like you trusted other people in your life and felt safe around them?
Yeah, certainly trust is a central has a central role in abuse. I just to back up, because of the way that I was groomed, because of the way that he brought me in, I don't describe it as I was physically forced to do anything. So in my mind's eye, in my child's eye, it was, this is like any other activity that I've voluntarily signed up for. So this happened in my house. I would then go over to his house. So it really was a very confusing thing to think about this as having been something done to me, and for me to be a victim. And it really took me a long time to realize all of the ramifications it had on my life. But yes, being in areas in my home, in my neighborhood, which was my entire world back then, and not being safe. I don't know if I would have described it that way, but that's the reality. And then not knowing who to trust on multiple levels. So yes, trust with my physical body, my physical presence. Trust that somebody has my best interest at heart. Trust that, and this is the case where it gets very complicated with my family, trust that, I have people like my parents who can or cannot prepare me for those type of situations and appropriately warn me. Trust that if I tell somebody, they're going to do something about it, and that they're going to be there for me, and quite frankly, give me the love, support, and recognition that this was a bad thing, this was abuse, that by definition, it's not my fault, and that there is healing possible. So on multiple levels, it definitely, the abuse crept in and made had physical implications. It had trust implications, relationship implications that I have experienced throughout my life.
How do you navigate those?
As best as possible. I think that there are relationships like mine with my wife and immediate family where you or I can kind of learn by experience. I know that my wife is there for me. I know that she loves me and she shows me every day in different ways. And I know the same thing about my children. I think the other side of that was, as I said, seeing the lack of support from my original family. Then I became more guarded. I became more withdrawn. In one example, and if we were having this conversation 5 years ago, I think you'd hear a lot more anger. I've worked through a lot of that of late, finding some empathy within myself to be able to better understand my family members' experiences and why they acted the way they did. But one of the things that was extremely painful and a significant violation was that my parents invited the parents of the man who abused me to my brother's wedding. So I didn't know that. I just showed up, they were there, and I didn't, haven't mentioned it yet, but definitely have some alcohol issues and totally got drunk at the wedding, was very visibly demonstrative, and I guess you could say made a fool of myself at the wedding, including like just randomly finding each bridesmaid and taking them out the dance floor, a twirl, and in one thankfully moment of lucidity, I went over to pick up I think she was an 85-year-old mother of the bride, and fortunately she said, I have osteoporosis, which I had no idea what it was, but I knew it wasn't something that I should be picking her up and swinging her, so I put her down. So as you can imagine, like that, getting that continued message of nobody ever asking me, how are you doing? Nobody ever checking in to say, is there anything I can do for you? And in that particularly vivid example of just not only neglect, but in this case, a very proactive demonstration of invalidating my experience. So again, I think the navigation was seeing enough of that data to realize that it would not be safe for me to trust my family with my heart.
How has that changed? You mentioned that, 5 years ago, if we were having this conversation, you would have had much more anger. What has changed and how has that changed?
Yeah, it's really I think of it as a remarkable and miraculous set of events. And it does revolve around the I Have the Right to organization and Jesse Brout's sexual assault and rape, and her personal courage and response, and her family's love and support and response. So in months away from my 52nd birthday, which incidentally 52 is the average age of disclosure for child sexual abuse. I've been in the financial services industry for 30 years. And I guess I'll put some caveats in there as well, which is I can say this as an if statement and as a true statement, which is nobody would ever have known that I was a victim of child sexual abuse. I carried myself through the high school years, then through college, really, as I said, embraced the masculine culture, and that led to success in the financial industry, services industry. So in this particular day, I was searching for a potential business contact on LinkedIn. You name the word serendipity, luck, miracle. I came across Alex Proust's name. He was at the firm that I was searching, but he was not the person I was searching for. And I paused just long enough to see his description, which was sexual assault survivor advocate. And those 4 words started me on a journey of healing that I was not able to achieve through 40 years of introspection, 40 years of therapy, 40 years of my marriage. And what I did is I stopped, I clicked in, and there was an interview of Alex and Chessie on Bloomberg News. Again, to me, Bloomberg being a very data and financial services focused organization, it was like the number of things that were both shocking and revelatory for me, watching this unfold and listening to that interview where Chessie bravely talked about her experience, talked about the rape itself, talked about the aftermath and the lack of support that she received from the schools community, friend communities, neighborhood communities, and yet her determination and Alex and Susan, her parents, stalwart support of her throughout that entire experience, just reiterating that it was not her fault and that she's very much loved and supported, and they'll do whatever they can to bring peace, healing, and justice for whatever that meant for her. And it was like the proverbial sun which had set in my 10, 11, 12-year-old years had just broken through and risen. Mm. And I just messaged Alex and said, again, I do not know him at this point. I messaged him and said much of what I said here, which is your daughter's courage is truly remarkable and a beacon of hope for so many survivors. And you have broken the mold, the male mold, and used your position, used your influence to not only create the organization I have the right to, but then to put that out into the universe in a non-health-related setting, particularly in the financial services arena, was to me an act of similar bravery and strength that I just wanted to thank them both, thank their family. A couple of hours later, he responded. We ended up talking within a week or so, and that's when he said those breakthrough words to me directly, which is, it's not your fault, you're not alone, and that there are people who care about you. And through their experience, even though there were so many institutional and personal forces that were aligned to silence them, that they kept going. They found communities of love. They found communities of connection. They found ways to create relationships, quite frankly, that were not possible prior to the assault. And that's something similar for me. Is it just unlocked? It unlocked by having the effect of lifting the stigma, ridding myself of any shame and any self-blame, that then allowed me to really start to work on myself in therapy and out in ways that I was open to seeing other people's experiences that that had hurt me in the past.
How did you open yourself up to ridding yourself of those feelings of shame? I mean, that's, it would be amazing if that's something that, you could snap your fingers and, do away with, but that is so strongly, deeply, deeply not the case. How did you begin that? And what did that look like for you?
It is something that I wish I could articulate and bottle. Because I think earlier in my journey over the last few years, I would have said, oh, it was just seeing those 4 words on LinkedIn. It was just talking to Alex. It was just witnessing the bravery of Chessie and then their family. But in further reflection, I think that it was also built on a foundation of 40 years. So whereas that first decade, I didn't get the support, I did survive. I did live. I was able to navigate life. I was able to navigate relationships. I was able to find love. In that love, I was then able to find therapy. And I started to work on myself. So a lot of that initial therapy had nothing to do with sexual violence and sexual abuse. It had to do with growing up in a family that was not emotionally connected.
Yeah.
My mother's mother died when she was 9 years old, and she really enveloped herself with smiles and joy and was a very lovely person, but was not able to kind of achieve that level of emotional depth. And my father, also a very wonderful person, kept a good deal of emotional distance between himself and others, and like many men, found himself very lonely. So that was kind of my initial piece of peeling back the just how do I relate as a human, and how do I start to understand myself, and then stuck with therapy. We've done couples therapy, and then having 3 wonderful children and experiencing the love and the closeness and the bonds that come with that. Just for everybody's disclosure, none of this is easy. There's all life going on as well. Right. So this is some version of, for the older folks, Walton Mountain or some perfect idyllic family. But for me, I was able to lift myself up with the help of others. It was not alone. However, when I think about the abuse, and when I think about the self-blame and the shame, those things really required that external experience of witnessing Alex in particular through LinkedIn, and Chessie through her story, to realize, wait a minute, that was wrong. I was abused. I was wrong. I wasn't at fault. I'm not alone. There's millions others out here like me that really did, in my case, lead to flipping a switch.
Just as we wrap up, if there was something that you could say to 12-year-old Steve, then 20-year-old Steve, then 30-year-old Steve, what would you want to say?
One of the things that I've been very, very fortunate to do through largely the love and support from the I Have the Right to community is speak to audiences of all ages, predominantly boys and adolescent men, but I've expanded to speak in a corporate setting to all people of all ages. And one of the things that, a couple of things that I would have loved to have heard as a 12-year-old, and I tell myself as a 12-year-old, is that you did the hard part. You did the hard part. You lived through trauma. You didn't know what it is. You don't have a word for it. You don't understand it. But what happened to you wasn't right. It's not your fault. You voluntarily going over to his house. You keeping a secret that he forced you through mind games to keep. It's not your fault. And you're not alone. There are millions and millions and millions of other kids who go through this same thing. You did the hard part, Steve. Thank you. I not only forgive you, but I respect you. And I thank you for doing that part. I'm going to take over from here. And I think as I look into my 20s and 30s, it's that same message, as in my 20s, like I said, I did and said things that I absolutely regret. I, as I said, kind of along the masculinity line or inappropriate things I said to women, or obsession about pornography and talking about it in all settings and glorifying it. I would say that's not the path we need to take, Steve. We need to stop. It's great you're in therapy, but let's get to the core of what's happening here, is that it created a sense of self-loathing that I was just trying to avoid. And I was filling this void of belonging with these other unsatisfying experiences. And then into my 40s, it's, you've got a great family. Really appreciate what you've been able to do and the relationships you've been able to form. There's one more thing we got to conquer. Got to get to the point where you can shed that shame, shed that self-blame, shed those other pieces that are eating you alive and destroying you from the inside. Real, authentic, meaningful relationships are possible. Trust is possible. Communities of love are possible. It might not seem right now, but they are out there. So kind of hang in there, buddy. And then I think to everybody else, it's kind of bring it back to where we started, which is 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men. That means somewhere around 40 million people, which is more than the state of California, our biggest state in the nation. This is a huge problem. There's many causes for it. But to the people who have been victimized by virtue of going on every day from the moment that ends or through that experience, you are a survivor.
Steve, thank you so incredibly much for your time and for speaking to me today. I often think that the most generous thing that someone could do would be to share their experience and share their story and allow themselves to be vulnerable to other people in a way that makes their life, make more sense or helps them navigate, the challenging moments in life that are, inevitable in one way or another. And so I'm so grateful to you for your willingness and your generosity to do that.
Great. Thank you so much, Sophie, for doing this. And I'll just, to wrap on a point I think I've made several times. It took watching a 15-year-old girl put all this weight on her shoulders for me to realize that it's on all of us, and it's not fair to kind of push it down to the younger generations. We all have a role to play in this, and part of that role is for those that are comfortable and bringing that message out into the world so that we can really recognize the extent of the problem and the extent of the healing possible.
Thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciate it. It's great to talk
Great.
to you.
Thank you, Sophie. Have a great day.
Thank you.